So I just want to say welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see you here. And I hope everyone's getting out there and getting opportunities to see the whales and the wind by the sea jellyfish that are all over the place. And of course, all the mola mola that have come up to eat all of those. Our next presenter is for June 14th. And we may be able to have that presentation aboard the Legacy while it's docked in the Cuvera Basin. So make sure you watch your emails and watch our postings through our Instagram, website, and Facebook for more details and to confirm that that is in fact where we'll be having the meeting. So on January 14th, we'll have Danielle Halsey, and she's the Chief Science Officer at Hub's SeaWorld Research Institute, and she oversees the science program at their main location in Mission Bay, their hatchery in Carlsbad, California, and then she's also heading the office in Melbourne Beach, Florida, and she'll be sharing some of her research and findings with us. On June 17th, we'll be having a tour of the Hub's SeaWorld Research Institute hatchery, and it's where they are working with white sea bass and have developed a program to reintroduce 4,000 little fish back into the ocean to help its population along. So we'll be doing that from 10 to 11:30, and again, more information with the details of where to park and how to get there will be forthcoming. On July 12th, we'll have Jessica Krantz from NOAA, and she'll be giving a presentation on the Northern Pacific right whale. This evening, we have Kirsten Donald, and Kirsten is the Vice President of Education and Ocean Advocacy at Pacific Marine Mammal Center. She earned her master's degree in marine mammal science from the University of Wales in the UK. She began her career in 1996 at the Dolphin Research Center in the Florida Keys, where she served as Director of Education and Director for the College of Marine Mammal Professions, or the Dolphin Research Center Training Institute. Yeah. And she left the Research Center and headed to the Pacific Marine Mammal Center in 2015, where she wanted to learn more about pinniped conservation and research. She's also serves on the board of Southwest Marine Educators Association, and over the past 27 years has been involved in the care, training, and research of marine mammals, population management analysis, conservation efforts, as well as marine mammal stranding and rescue efforts that include multiple species such as whales and dolphins, manatees, seals, and sea lions. And then the opportunity to expand the educational mission of the Marine Mammal Center and contribute directly to conservation and research efforts keep her continuously motivated and on the move. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kirsten Donald.
Well, thank you so much. I am so grateful to talk with you today. It's always great to share what PMMC is doing, because we are growing by leaps and bounds and expanding pretty much everything we're doing, whether it be education, new methods of rescue and rehabilitation, or our research, which is also growing exponentially at the moment. So, so thank you for having me here. I'm going to share with you our current efforts, and I'm going to focus in on 2022 to let you know what happened that year. But I'm going to start with a video, which I'm going to pause this just a second because I realized that, and I always forget that, so I apologize. When I share, I'm supposed to click this little box that says share sound. So let's do this over again. Okay, here we go. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So you can see these are animals we're picking up. You can't help but love that cute little face. That was Sydney. She was less than 24 hours old when we rescued her. She'd been abandoned. But you can see the animals that we pick up are usually pretty bad off. They're emaciated, have injuries, things like that. This is from one of the oil rigs. Those guys will call us if they find an animal that hanging out that needs attention. And they're just so tired when we pick them up. And a lot of things we see are fish hooks, definitely, and some entanglements, which I'll talk about. This is bringing them in. The first step that happens is weighing them. And there's Sydney. She's got a little bit fatter there. See, this guy has an eye issue. It's not uncommon to see sea lions or seals with eye issues. You see, they're all getting a little fatter now. And Sydney got really chunky. And this was one of the animals we rescued that had gill nut around his neck. But that's him swimming for the first time. And so I will talk about all of these things in a little more detail later, but released from beaches and boats. Beaches are primarily sea lions and harbor seals, while elephant seals would typically release off of boats. And this is totally the best part of what we do. There's Mahomes going back after his neck injury. So that's, like I said, the best feeling, because you take an animal that you thought might not have survived, or you think you're not sure if it's going to survive, and then you get to the point where you get to release it, and there's no better feeling. This, if you've never been to PMMC, this is kind of what it looks like. We're in a little red barn. It used to be an animal shelter, the ASPCA, for large hoof stock, and then they moved out, and the city gave us this building for $1 a year. And we were able to turn it into a marine mammal rehabilitation center. And so you can see on the right side that we've got a number of different pools that the animals transition to once they're past critical care. They range in size, just based on where the animals are in their rehabilitation. But we began as Friends of the Sea Lion in 1971, and it was started by 2 lifeguards. One of them started bringing animals back to his house to rehabilitate. Nobody was doing it at the time. And then his friend that was also a lifeguard happened to be a marine biology teacher at Laguna Beach High School. And he began helping him, but then further from that, he decided to start education programs at PMMC. And so that's how our education aspect was born, in addition to the rescue and rehab. We became the first marine mammal rescue rehab center in all of California at the time, and it was all pre-Marine Mammal Protection Act as well. So we are, we hold our history very dear and continue trying to fulfill the dream of both of our founders going forward. So our patients, we have there's 5 patients that we bring in typically. And that is obviously the one that is most numerous is the California sea lion. And that is followed by the northern elephant seal. California sea lions, we generally get usually about 100 or so of them a year. It depends on the year and the environmental conditions. In 2015, the UME with the heat wave was so bad that we actually rescued 600 animals that year. And we typically rescue around 200 to 250 a year. So that was a big increase. So elephant seals, we normally do between 20 and 50 a year. That's pretty normal. I'll talk about 2022 being an odd year. Harbor seals, we rescue anywhere between 1 and 11 a year. And then we used to get several northern fur seals a year. And then all of a sudden it switched where we weren't seeing the northerns anymore, but we were seeing a lot of Guadalupe fur seals. Now, Guadalupe fur seals are an endangered species, and they need a very specific isolation area because they're very skittish. And so they need to be away from a lot of commotion. We don't have that option, and so we will stabilize them, and then once they are stabilized, we bring them down to SeaWorld's Rescue Rehab Center for them to finish out that rehabilitation because they have the appropriate areas to be able to do that. So those are the animals we rescued. Now we do also rescue dolphins and whales that come ashore. Usually that's not a great outcome because by the time they hit the shores, they're pretty bad off. But another thing we do that a lot of people don't know about is we are part of the network's whale disentanglement team. And we are one of their primary crews for Southern California. And so we will often go out there and be, disentangling humpbacks or gray whales. Those tend to be the ones that get entangled the most. But that happens a couple of times a year. I'd say anywhere from 4 to 10 times a year, maybe, in some cases more or some cases less. So that's another passion of ours. So I'm sure you are all aware, but then again, it is the American Cetacean Society, which I have to admit, my favorite marine mammal is not a pinniped. It's actually the bottlenose dolphin. That's what I grew up on with early in my career, and I still hold them near and dear to my heart. But I love pinnipeds too. Ever since joining PMMC, I've gained like a whole new respect for them. And the elephant seal has definitely stolen my heart. So they're all part of a group called Pinnipedia, and that just means basically fin-footed. And they're semi-aquatic carnivorous animals, and there's around 33 living species, and this does include the walrus. There are 3 groups of pinnipeds. The otarids, which are the eared seals, they have ear flaps. And so that would basically be your sea lions and fur seals. And then you have your true seals, and that's pretty much everybody else but the walrus. And so your elephant seals and harbor seals, they all fall in this category because they are the ones that cannot walk on all 4s. They swim with their back flippers. They have claws in the front short front flippers, and then they have holes for ears rather than ear flaps, whereas our otarid friends have very long front flippers that's what they use to propel themselves. And then they have these little ear flaps. And then probably most importantly to them also is the fact that they can turn that hind end under and walk with all 4 flippers. Now, the walrus is the 3rd category of pinniped. It's an odobenid. And there's one species, but they can be broken down into Atlantic and Pacific. Fortunately, we do not get walrus down here. So there's a number of threats to marine mammals. Does anyone want to care to shout some out?
Gill nets.
Yep, definitely.
Any type of fishing gear, ship strikes.
Yep. Oh, yes. Ship strikes.
Starvation.
Starvation. Yes.
Orca.
Plastics in the water.
Orcas. Yep. So yeah, I forgot that the slide was about the natural threats. So, obviously our friends, the great whites, they've got to eat, just like everybody else, and they do like sea lions. So it does happen. And then, of course, our orca friends, which the ones around here, the marine mammal eating types, tend to prefer sea lion, although that one year we had that group of orcas come in that were the dolphin eating type, and that was just a disaster because I don't know if you heard about this, but up in Dana Point, one of the whale watching boats at that time had gone out. They were able to watch this pod of dolphins go by, and then all of a sudden orcas showed up, and of course the dolphins are like, oh, the orcas around here only eat sea lions, so I'm safe. And unbeknownst to them, that was not the case, and right in front of the entire whale watching trip, the orcas ate the dolphins right there. So they are, they're definitely marine mammal eating types that pass through. And so that's something that we do worry about. And in fact, if we hear their reports of orcas in the area, we will hold off on releases for a few days until we hear that they've gone out of the area, just to give our patients the best chance. So in 2022, our response was not as heavy, which was great. We had less sea lions than we had the year before, so 71 versus 73. The odd thing is that elephant seals went down dramatically, in that we normally see 20 to 50 a year, and last year we saw 5. And it took us a little digging, but we did find that there was a tsunami wave that did hit the islands, and there is video of the elephant seal pups being washed out to sea, and that it was at a time where they should have still been nursing and wouldn't have been able to dive, things like that. So we think a lot of them died last year. And so this year we are back to a normal amount. We've got around 33 elephant seals, so we're back to normal, which I was glad to hear. And then let's see, harbor seals. Harbor seals for last year were steady, about 4. It's been interesting. We haven't received any harbor seals this year, which by now we normally would have. Fur seals have been going up, and they particularly are Guadalupe, although this year was interesting. In January, we got a northern fur seal for the first time in 5 years. And so that was really exciting for us. Her name was Sweet Pea, and she did really well. And everybody got a kick out of the fact that they act like otters but look like little tiny sea lions. So, and then our cetacean live response was low. We only had 1 live that we had to rescue. Now, as far as dead, we also do pick up and respond to dead animals because they tell us a story about what's going on in the ocean. And so we can take a lot of samples, do necropsy, and really get an idea of why they died. and learn more about what's going on in the ocean. So we actually did pick up 42 deceased sea lions, elephant seals, only one, a couple of harbor seals, a couple of fur seals, but then there were a lot of dolphins. This has been steadily going up from year to year, which I'm going to show you a graph on in a minute. So this gives you an idea of what's been going on with sea lions strandings over the course of, pretty much the last decade. And you can see between 2013 and 2016, that was the unusual mortality event years due to the marine heat wave. And so we had, really significant spikes, and they've been pretty much going down since then back to a normal level. Now, next year is supposed to be El Nino, although they said that about this year. And so we are expecting that we're going to see starvation go up once the El Nino hits, because that's when it gets warm. All of the fish go further out to sea or deeper in the sea where they can get to cooler waters. And unfortunately, sea lions, pups can't reach that far. And then the moms also don't want to go that far, because then they're causing their pups to starve from not getting enough milk. So we'll see if that happens. I kind of hope it's not next year, because we are going into renovations. And so for 2024, we will be closed to the public while that happens. We will still be doing our rescue operations though. And we're just going to have kind of a MASH unit set up at another site until our facility is finished. And I can talk more about that later. So this is the cetacean response for the last 10 years. And you can see there is a dramatic increase in strandings in Orange County. And we're not exactly sure why this is. We're trying to figure it out. One of the things that I notice, and there's no like science-based that I'm including in this, it's just an observation, is that a lot of our strandings happen directly after rains. And so it leaves me wondering about, what's running off the watershed into the water, and if that's just the tipping point that, is the, straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing at the time for those animals. But I'm not sure, because in some ways that doesn't make sense, in that usually chemicals take time to affect you, but who knows what kind of chemicals. So that is something that we're researching. And we take a ton of different samples and send them off, and then we also store them for future research projects as well. Like I said, we had high numbers of dead dolphins. We're continuing. We did have rare species last year, which was really interesting. One was a northern right whale dolphin, which I think I was out of town at that time. And I'm so mad, because I've never actually seen one. So that would have been kind of cool, even though it was dead, to see. And then we also had a pygmy sperm whale strand as well. And around that same time, there was another one that stranded up in LA County. We were successful with a couple of whale disentanglements last year, so that was like a huge win for us. And then, yeah, our veterinarian likes to say the heavyweight champion for last year was a 560-pound whopper of a dolphin. And then, but the real one was the gray whale that we can only estimate at 15,000 pounds. So why are they stranding? You all shouted out a number of good reasons that all apply. Probably the number one happens to deal with malnutrition for these pups. And the State of the Coast Ocean report that came out last year was something that we contributed to. One of the things that came out of the analysis is just that these kind of climate events are going to continue, and they're going to increase in frequency, duration, and intensity. And so that is going to have cascading effects throughout the food webs as they respond to that kind of climate change. And unfortunately, for the pinnipeds, that's going to mean more stranding events because the fish will just not be available. It's going to move out of the area to waters that are cooler, and the pups just cannot reach them. And this is kind of what it looks like when we get those events. We get animals that looks like bags of bones, really, that they have nothing else to sustain them. And it's due to those prey shifts that happens. Now, I will say this animal we rescued, and he was nursed back to health, and he got to go back home all fat and happy. So he did just fine, which, you know, this is the kind of animal we look at and go, is this actually going to happen? You know, and like I said, it's so gratifying when you take an animal like this that you weren't sure you could save and watch it go back home nice and healthy. With these warmer waters, as you probably know, algal blooms really enjoy warmer waters. They also really enjoy the fertilizer that comes off of our lawns, our gardens, our farms, when more and more rain comes. So when we get these El Nino events with lots of rain, this fertilizer goes into the ocean and causes the algal blooms to really bloom out of control, in addition to them having the warmer waters that they desire to. There's a particular algae that really affects a lot of species, and it's called Pseudonychia, and it creates a toxin that's called domoic acid. And you can see in this video, this is what happens to sea lions. It basically attacks the brain, causes brain damage, and the animals end up with significant seizures, respiratory problems, or dying. And there's two types of domoic acid cases. One is acute, where they just get a massive dose once. And in those cases, it's possible for us to flush toxins out of their system before it reaches the brain. And we can possibly save those animals by doing that. The other case is chronic, where they're repeatedly exposed to doses. They may be a little lower, they could be the same amount, but when that happens, that is damage that has happened to the brain that is irreversible. And so unfortunately, in those cases, we have to euthanize the females. It's usually females, just due to where they're feeding and where these algal blooms happen. And unfortunately, that means there's also a pup that's being euthanized, because they always are breeding and carrying pups. So that is another of the reasons. So this kind of shows you a little bit of what we rescued last year or responded to with regard to adults. We definitely don't get as many adults as we do youngsters, but with the live adults we rescued, we did have 5 acute cases that were exposed to domoic acid. Nicely, 4 of them were released. That 5th one had to be euthanized. And then we had 1 chronic, which was, of course, euthanized. Now, another thing that, which I'm not sure if I touch on anywhere else, so I'll talk about it quickly now, is that you can see there is a cancer case here that was euthanized. That is becoming more and more common. 20% of the adult animals that come through our center, and the rate seems to be increasing, are diagnosed with cancer, unfortunately. And there has been a link shown between the herpes virus that almost all of them carry and DDT. All those DDT barrels that are leaking out there, the DDT, the herpes virus is kind of the catalyst, and then the DDT infiltrates the system, and then those two things together create cancer, unfortunately. And so we're expecting that as we continue to wrestle with the DDT barrels, that we're just going to see more and more of this, unfortunately. So that's another problem that we're facing. One that you saw in the video was a maternal abandonment. Sydney was a great case. We found her in early spring. Somebody called her in because she was in a sea cave and they kept hearing her cry. And since it had been going on all day without a mom returning, we went to look and she was a newborn. She still had her umbilical cord and so needed to be rescued. But, and unfortunately with harbor seals that are that young, they need to be fed 3 times a day, if not more. That's a lot of hands-on. And unfortunately with a lot of hands-on that young, you end up having animals that become attached to you or habituated. And so Sydney, we had basically deemed her non-releasable because of that. And she went to the New York aquarium, adopted her. But the nice thing about it is that she's never going to have to worry about sharks. She's never going to have to worry about disease or lack of food. And she's going to be an ambassador for her species, which is great because a lot of these places will tell the story of these animals and really help people understand the impact we're having on the planet. So plastic ingestion is something that we see as well. This animal Ping, you can see is obviously emaciated. We treated him like an emaciated case and he was not responding. We couldn't figure out why. And unfortunately, I don't think plastic bags really image well on an x-ray. And so unfortunately Ping passed away. And when we did the necropsy and looked in Ping's stomach, we found a bunch of plastic shopping bags, Ziploc bags, as well as sandwich baggies and I think a couple balloons as well. So he was clearly starving, but then started going after plastic because it was something to fill his belly. And I'm sure he couldn't tell the difference between if this is plastic or if it's food. And so that was an unfortunate case, but with all of these cases, we try to learn from them so that we can improve our rehabilitation methods, but then also we utilize these to talk to the public about these issues and what they can do about it. And I think it's something that we all need to be really reinforcing with people in our lives is about single-use plastics and how we need to eradicate them from our lives. Because they are a serious problem in the environment and it has repercussions for the animals. Now, Sheriff's another story. He has a bit of a happier ending, fortunately, but he actually swam through the handle of a plastic bag. And as he grew, it got tighter and tighter around his neck. And so we did go rescue him. Now, we don't normally rescue from jetties because it's kind of dangerous. You climb down, it's slippery. And then by the time you climb down, the animals jump off. And so it's just not a great place to rescue. But Sheriff was in such a bad predicament that our brave rescuers went out there and were able to get him. And they cut that off just in case he got away. But they were able to bring him back. And you can see the pretty massive wound that caused. Fortunately, it wasn't ridiculously deep. I mean, it obviously looks deep here, but it wasn't something that cut into an artery or into his esophagus or a trachea. And so we were able to give him some antibiotics and he healed up and we were able to send him back home, albeit with a nice scar on the front, but what was nice for us is it made him easily identifiable and he has been seen since that time out there. So he's still going. Now, last year, we rescued Mai Tai. It was a California sea lion pup, definitely underweight, but also had fishing hook and line embedded in his mouth. And so he needed to come in and actually have that surgically removed before we could actually do his rehab. But he was able to be released in October at a nice healthy almost 80 pounds. We do, when we release them, we give them a bit of a cushion. So even if they lose a bit of weight, they're not regressing and losing ground. We give them that cushion, so it gives them just enough that by the time they figure out fishing, they're at an appropriate weight anyway and can keep going from there. This is, wait a minute. Oh yeah, I guess this is my tie. This is better look at the mandible, although you can see the fishing line there. So I didn't realize I had two pictures. Three. Now Meadow was a little bit different. Meadow was a male pup. We don't know at the time that we named them what sex they are necessarily. So, you know, I guess it can be a good boy name. Maybe he's just a softer type. But anyway, he was rescued from the Newport Back Bay, and he's found like 2.5 miles from the mouth of the harbor, but that's the way the crow flies. So he obviously had to swim a lot longer than that, than 2.5 miles to get where he was. And let's see, does it show you? Yeah, so you can see where the arrows show where he was, and you can see that's a pretty far climb for him to get all the way up there. So he was really lost and confused as to where he was. And you can see him, the picture, that little black blob next to that bush is Meadow. And that's him in rehab. He's got such a cute face. But he was found with fish hooks in the right and left front flippers. And what that indicates is he was probably out on a jetty, because a lot of people that fish out on jetties leave hook and line just discarded around, and the sea lions climb up there, and that's when they get it embedded in their flippers. But he was able to be released as well, so he did well in rehab. So outside of those fishing lures and line, a gill net is probably the most common entanglement seen in our patients by far. It actually, the fishery kills more sea lions than any other fishery all up and down the West Coast. And one of the things it doesn't include are the animals that are entangled and break free but die later. And that's something that we're trying to impress upon the government. We went to a government meeting to say, hey, you're not including all these other guys in those numbers. And so it's not an accurate representation of how many animals are being affected by gill net. And so, you know, it's good that we are keeping numbers on that. So gill net also affects our whale friends as well. Between 2000 and 2019, there were 32 reports of whales entangled in gill nets, and that's only the ones that were seen. You know, there's plenty out there, I'm sure, that we don't catch, and this is not including those big drift nets. We're talking, you know, active gill nets as opposed to the drift gill nets. Entanglement. And so this is something that we're always battling, and it can be hard to determine with the whales from what fishery it comes from necessarily. We just know it's gill net. Dungeness crab, by the way, is the other one that really affects the whales, and that's probably the fishery that impacts them the most on this coast, but they are working on it along with the Dungeness crab fishermen. They've got a good partnership going with NOAA trying to solve the problem. Gill nets also, which just stuns me, is that they have over an 89% bycatch rate, meaning that 10% of their catch is what is their target. And everything else is bycatch. And to me, that seems extraordinarily unsustainable. And it leaves me wondering, why are we still allowing this in our progressive state when just about all other coastal states have banned gill net fisheries completely? So it's something that I hope California really takes a hard look at. I know we've banned the swordfish gill net fishery, but we're having a real problem, especially with the halibut gill net fishery. Like I said, we are active in in terms of advocating with the government and other agencies. So it is something that we've taken upon ourselves to speak about. This is an animal that unfortunately washed up dead. We had been trying to go after this animal for quite a while. And unfortunately, every time we showed up, he was gone. And so we were just not able to get him. And then unfortunately, he washed up dead. And what we found is not only the entanglement around his neck, which would have eventually killed him, the gill net, but he had also swallowed a hook that perforated his GI tract. And that's what was the cause of him dying, actually. But this happens more frequently, unfortunately, than people know about. And so that's why we like to try to raise awareness about what's going on. So these entanglements are also common with adult males, and adult males are really tough. They are really aggressive animals. They're big, and so there is a lot of risk with trying to rescue these guys. There's the risk of, somebody getting injured while trying to rescue. There's the risk of the animal drowning in trying to capture them. What we have to do for them is actually either sedate them with a dart pole or a dart gun. And that requires NOAA approval for certain. It's a large operation. We have to have 5 boats and like upwards of 20 or more people. And then we're dealing with a sedative that could be very harmful to a person if it ricochets and hits somebody. And so we have to clear the area the best we can. And then, of course, the animal has to show up to the appointment, and they don't always show up to their appointments, unfortunately. So they're really a risky bunch, but we've really embraced trying to perfect this, and sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. This is Stubbs, and he's a good example of why it's so difficult. He was first sighted in 2021 in August. He was sighted 13 more times after that. We attempted to rescue him multiple times, but he just was not showing up when we got there. One time he did show up, and we pole darted him, but the sedative, because he was so large, he just burned it off really quickly. And so instead, we just watched him the entire time till it entirely burned off, because we knew we weren't going to be able to capture him, but we wanted to make sure he didn't drown. And so he was still out there. We were planning more efforts, but unfortunately, he ended up being found dead in July of 2022. So we had literally gone after him for a year's time and were unsuccessful. Now, other times we are successful, and this is Loki. I'm going to show you a video of his story, which is pretty impressive in terms of what he had to go through. I mean, you can see in the top right picture how bad his entanglement was. It was gill net entanglement. And in the x-ray, you can actually see where the 2 embedded parts are, that the black areas going into his throat. That was the embedded gill net. And then in the bottom left corner, you can see what his neck looked like when they finally got that off. He was under anesthesia in this picture. But that hole you see, and that the one that's being pulled apart a little bit, that's his trachea. See, he had a hole in his trachea. And so he could have easily drowned that way, but unfortunately didn't. But we were able to help him. And so I'm going to show you the video of what happened. So you can see his entanglement here. He was a bit of a tough case because he was young and he hung out with this other big, humongous male that we called Beast. and we had to get him without beast around. And so there were multiple attempts to save him, and we finally had a morning where she was able to dart him, and he jumped in the water, which is common after darting, and we were able to scoop him up and pop him in a kennel. So you can see how awfully uncomfortable. And the thing that's about gill nets is that this is something that takes them months, if not even years, to die from. And it is painful. It is really, really painful what they have to endure. And so this is us putting him under anesthesia, and the veterinarian is actually removing the gill net first. And so this took a long time for them to do. But once they did, they were able to stitch up one of his wounds. You're going to see that one of the wounds they left open, the one they stitched up, is the one with the hole in the trachea to keep that closed so it would heal. But in general, and that's the entanglement, in general, marine mammals heal better with their wound open because they heal from the inside out, unlike us, where we have to form a scab. And so you can see they sewed up the one wound, they took out the stitches here. It looks really great. And after that, he was given the opportunity to go swimming for the first time in rehab. So he very much enjoyed that. Like, finally, water. And then shortly thereafter, another couple months, and he got to go home. And he's still being recited because people call us about an animal with something on its neck, and it's really just his scar. You can see how happy he is to go back home. He's just, the adults all waddle. So that was a really nice, successful story. So we also learn a lot from all the various animals that come to us. And Effie was an interesting story in that Effie was originally rescued in 2012 for malnourishment and then released and contributed to the population for at least 10 years. And the reason we know that is she stranded again in 2022. And when we did a X-ray as well as I think an ultrasound, they were able to determine that Effie had cancer. And I forgot to show you, this is what she looked like when she stranded. She was really bad off, and so her body was really shutting down. But the wonderful thing, even though that this is horrible that's happened to her, is that we really gained a lot of data through her case on bioaccumulation of toxins and how long it takes for this whole DDT herpes virus to really turn into cancer. And so each of these cases gives us more information that will hopefully lead to better methods in the future of rehabilitating. This was a cool case last year. This is Tenzin. Tenzin was an elephant seal that came in with a shark bite, a really nasty wound on her back end. She also had some joint luxation in her rear flipper, and so joint luxation is kind of what you see on this human hand down there, where the joints kind of aren't aligned correctly. And so we had several problems that we had to deal with Tenzin. But what was neat was they used tilapia skin to help heal her wound. And this is something that's used with humans as well as other animals that have suffered severe burns. And we did see some really great benefits from this, where her wound healed much faster. So that was really exciting to be able to use it on an elephant seal for the first time. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about how our rescue and rehab and release works. And, typically we receive a call from the public. It could be the public, it could be lifeguards, it could be Harbor Patrol. Somebody gives us a call, and then the first thing that has to happen, they have to send us a picture. We will not go on any rescue without a picture because in the past, people have said there's an animal here that needs to be rescued and we've shown up and it's a rock, or it's an animal that's just resting. And so having that picture really helps us, especially in the cases of when people say in their perception it's a small animal, and we've sent one person for that small animal and it turns out to be a 100-pound elephant seal, and we sent an 80-pound rescuer to go help out with that. And so pictures really help us determine the team that we need to send out. And this guy in this picture, that's Mahomes. You saw him in that first video I showed you where he was swimming again and had the neck wounds, but then went back home with a scar. That's him at his rescue. He was a feisty one. So then we send out our rescue team. They go grab the animal. These are some examples of rescues. These are 4 different types of rescues that we do. So there's beach rescues, and this is an adult female, probably a domoic acid case because she's just kind of laying there, and adults usually don't come on shore on mainland without having issues. So that, we use nets for beach catchers like this. This is a disentanglement. This is not something we had to bring the animal in because the entanglement had not embedded in the skin. So it was tight and snug, but not hurting the animal. And this is one of our NOAA stranding coordinators. He's really good at this. And so the sea lion's sleeping, he cuts it off, and the sea lion didn't even notice till it was over. And then he was able to go back in and grab what fell off. And so that is another type. This is a rescue from a jetty. It really shows you how difficult they are in that, you've got rocks to climb and then the animal can move. This guy you could see was really needing to come in. You could see those shoulder blades there. And so it was worth doing. When we see animals that are that bad off that are on jetties, we don't wait for them to show up somewhere else. We just go. And then we have rescued from oil rigs before as well. The guys out there don't like to see the animals in harm's way, so they call us. You can see there's the animal, it's entangled. You may have seen other animals kind of peek their head around as well. There's one right there going, what's going on? And here, because they didn't want to stress the animal out, bringing it all the way back to the center with a long boat ride, the entanglement, while it does, when they cut it off, you can see it definitely has a wound, but it was not really severe. And these guys heal really, really well in salt water. And so it was deemed better to just release the animal right then and there because it wasn't severely compromised. And you see it just jumps in. It's like, I'm out. So once they get to PMMC, we weigh them. That's their measuring stick for the time that they're with us to see how well they're doing and if they're increasing in weight. They get assessed by the vet team for an admission exam. And then we collect just about every sample that can come out of a sea lion, whether it's snot or fecal matter or saliva. If it's there, we will collect it. And then all of them get, especially the sea lions, get an X-ray upon admission. And this is exactly why, is because we see such a high frequency of animals swallowing hooks because they have either, and typically they're swallowing fish on hooks, and it usually starts with people feeding them or dumping their chum off boats. And then the animals realize fish is associated with boats. And then they see fish hanging off of boats on a fishing line, and it becomes McDonald's for sea lions. They abandon their fishing methods and go to this because it's a lot easier. But sometimes they get it wrong, unfortunately. And so these x-rays help us identify whether we need to go in with an endoscope to remove those. Sometimes we also see bullet wounds. This is not uncommon with sea lions to get bullet wounds, or we've seen buckshot in them too as well, often in their heads. And so those are something that if we can, we'll try to remove it. However, if it's not a severe impediment, it's better just to leave it alone. This is an animal that actually was having a hard time finding fish, and so he filled his belly with rocks. He had over 40 rocks in his belly, and this is not uncommon for sea lions when they're adults, like the adult males, when they're guarding their females, they will sometimes ingest large rocks to feel full, and then at the end of breeding season, they'll regurgitate them and get rid of them and move on. But these guys, you know, pups just don't know what to really do. So, I mean, it's somewhat natural for them to swallow rocks, but not in this circumstance. And so we had to go with an endoscope on multiple different occasions because sea lions can only be under anesthesia for so long. So we had to do several different procedures to remove all the rocks from his system. And so this is kind of what anesthesia looks like. This is one of our elephant seals under anesthesia. A long time ago, people used to be very scared of doing anesthesia with pinnipeds because of that dive reflex they go into and then they stop breathing. But we can actually intubate them and breathe for them. This is not something we can do with cetaceans, but we can do it with these guys, which allows us to do more and more veterinary procedures, which is great. Now, when they come in, they usually haven't been eating in a while, especially elephant seals. And that's what elephant seals sound like. He's got a buddy in his pen there that's vocalizing. But when they first come in, their stomachs have not eaten in so long that ingesting whole food is too hard on their stomach. And so we will actually give them fish smoothies. You know, we'll grind up the fish and put Pedialyte in it, as well as different medications and vitamins and minerals. When we do go in, we always listen for a breath first to make sure we're not in the lungs. But our rehabbers are really good, so they're really good at this. And we just try to do it as quickly as possible, so it's the least stressful it can be. Nicely, they're not keen on this process, so it kind of keeps them wary of us, which we want them to be wary when they go back in the wild. So that's a positive of that. This is fish school. So I'm trying to remember. After they've been tube fed, we transition them to whole foods. The otarids usually start with a bowl of food and then graduate to these kiddie pools. Seals start with kiddie pools because they don't have necks for bowls. And so we just throw the fish in and they eat there. Then they get access to dive pools. Initially, they start in dive pools by themselves. And once they get really good at claiming fish in dive pools, then we add buddies. So they start with another animal with them, then maybe 2 animals with them. And then when they get really good, this is what happens. So sea lions need to learn how to compete. So it's like kind of like I explained to people, it's like little kids with a piñata when they break it open. They don't cooperate. It's just every sea lion for himself, and they just gobble them down. And so they have to learn how to compete. Our elephant seals, the only reason that once they're at that stage that we feed them together like that is not for competition because they eat solo in the wild. It's really just out of convenience for being able to feed them, conveniently for us. And it doesn't really matter to them. Now, we obviously don't know who's getting what. You know, we weigh out enough for the entire pool. So this is when we weigh them once a week so we can see what their weight gain is. And then if they are doing anything but going up, they go back to kindergarten to learn it all over again. So let's see. Then they have to meet 3 criteria for release. They have to have a clean bill of health. They have to weigh a proper amount for the age class and species. And then they have to show that they can forage effectively on their own. And if they can do all that, they're tagged on one of their flippers. So for the eared seals, we tag them on the front flippers, and boys get them on the left. So that guy is a boy. And girls get them on the right. And we try to remember that by saying girls are always right. You can tell, the ratio of men to women at PMMC through that. And then if you are a true seal, you get tagged on your back flippers, because that's a more kind of fleshy area like an earlobe. So it's easier to tag them there. And then we either will release them at a local beach, or we will take them out of in a boat like we saw in that video. And so here are some releases. So here's a sea lion release that goes really well. I've seen it when they don't go this smoothly. So when we're lucky, they all just run right out of their crates into the ocean. Other times, it may take them a little while because it's very intimidating to hear that surf again and have this big wide open space. And so they might hide in the kennels for a while before they go. Elephant seals, we prefer to release from boats. And that's simply because they are open ocean creatures. And so it's nicer to get them closer to where they need to be and where they're going to forage. And so we kind of take them out a ways. This also helps us simply that elephant seals will take 2 hours to get off a beach. You open the crates, they come out, they go a few paces, they stop, they flip sand on their backs, they lay there, then they get up, and they move some more, stop, flip some more, stand, lay there. Then they finally make it in the ocean, they roll around, and then they come back out and flip some more sand. So it can literally take 2 hours to get them off the beach, and we have to stay there because they can be hazardous to people. And so we finally got it in our heads it would just be safer, easier, and better for them to go from a boat. And so when we can, we do the boat releases. We also do research. We do a lot of research. You can see here, this is what our research focuses on, our primary areas: sea lion cancer, looking at algal blooms and domoic acid. We are focused on the Guadalupe fur seal, which I'll show in a minute. Cetacean research. We're always looking for better methods and improved methods for our patient care, and then looking at entanglement and fishery interaction. So those are our main areas of research. And so this kind of gives you a couple of ideas of, these are some studies that we're doing currently or have already finished. And so, we do radiographs and what they tell us about fishing gear and gun shots. Like I mentioned, we are looking at legacy contaminants like DDT and how they're affecting the domoic acid problems out there. We're actually working with squirp, and we're looking at whether or not sea lions can be a good first indicator of an algal bloom before people even can detect it. So that's an interesting one. Then also looking at what happens with the domoic acid exposure between pups and moms. It does cross the placental line. And so if moms ingest domoic acid, their pups get it too. And so often we have to euthanize pups because they will start expressing that and having seizures at about 4 years of age. Then some other kind of interesting studies include microplastic distribution in tissues. We're looking at sewage discharge because we're finding a ton of antibiotic resistance in the ocean, which is super, super scary. And then we're actually looking at if we can do veterinary intervention for large whales, where we will do a house call to a whale, and in some cases might deliver antibiotics or something else that could help these large whales. And then because Guadalupe fur seals waffle between threatened and endangered, we are getting really involved with Guadalupe fur seal health assessments, but also in engaging, trying to decide management practice, how to best manage and handle that species to bring it back from being threatened or endangered. And so we had the first International Guadalupe Fur Seal workshop ever. We just had it a couple of months ago, and because the Guadalupe fur seals have been going through an unusual mortality event. We think that's due to prey shifting because of climate change, which is going to produce more and more significant problems for them. We are really trying hard to have more methodology to better stabilize these guys when they come in. And then the big thing with this workshop was trying to look at how we can influence management and policymakers, and have the US and Mexico actually cooperate in that, so that we can create a species survival plan for these guys. And then we also occasionally satellite tag animals. It's just glued to their fur, so it doesn't hurt them at all. And for sea lions, it eventually sheds off. If you're a seal, as you know, they molt, so it all falls off at once. And it can give us good data about the animal and where they're going. Now, we're unfortunately too poor to afford the sat tags that do tons of stuff. You know, like I would love to get one that did dive depth and salinity and temperature and all of that, but all we are able to do, and they're so expensive, is the ones that we can afford, which are about $5,000 each. And that, by the way, is what rehabbing one animal costs, if it's a normal rehab. And so we'd rather really spend it on the animals than doing sat tags. But when we can, we do put the sat tags on, and we can at least tell their location. And here you can see two different animals. And the reason we sat tag these guys is that sometimes pups will strand at very, very young ages. So if they strand, I think it's less than 6 months old, we are supposed to euthanize them per the government, because there's no more room at the inn, at zoos and aquariums, really. It's very hard to place sea lions because there are so many in human care right now. And I believe a lot of zoos and aquariums aren't breeding sea lions because they know this is an issue, that there will be future animals that need homes. And so anyway, what we were trying to do is look, we don't want to euthanize these guys. We also would like to see them go back to the wild. Can we try new methodology to raise them and in a way that doesn't cause habituation or an attachment? Because when they're that young, they imprint. And so we did try this. We put these sat tags on, and in one case, the animal was very successful. So the one in blue was going to all the right places. And she was mostly hanging out on the islands and going in areas near the islands. And then the other animal was taking these big long circuits around, did make it out to the islands, but was just not doing what we had hoped. And unfortunately, the tag stopped working at one point in time. And so we assumed that he was dead. It did show back up again, but it was just in one place. So it either fell off or he died. And we're not sure because we couldn't at that time get anyone out to the islands to see if they could recover that tag, unfortunately. So don't know what happened there. Hopefully it just fell off and he did fine. And so one of the things that we try to engage the public in order to help us keep track of the animals that we have rehabbed is an app that we created with UCI students from the informatics department. They built, and actually we've had several versions of this, but it's called Seal Spotter. And it allows the public to report a tagged animal, not a rescue animal, but a tagged animal. So that, like, let's say somebody's out on a whale watching boat and they go by a buoy and see an animal with the orange tag, they can take a picture and then they can zoom in on that tag, and then they fill out this quick little form that asks them a couple questions, and then boom, it goes to us and we're able to find more information about the animal, which is huge because we need to know if our efforts are working, and also, you know, how the animals change over time. Because we, like, a good example is there was one animal that we had released, and we came across him like a year later, and he was really skinny, and we were like, maybe we should rescue him again, da, 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 da. And then we decided not to. And then later in the season in August, he was fat and happy and just fine. So, and what we learned from him, that was his process every year. And so, so this can help us, you know, gain that kind of data to say, how are they changing throughout the year and with different conditions and seasons, and as well as, you know, how are they doing, and also how long are they living. We had an animal wash up recently dead with a tag, and actually it wasn't recently, it was about 2 years ago. And he was, I want to say, based on the tag number, he was 20 years old, which was pretty impressive because males don't normally live that long. They have rough lives, and so typically they live between 7 and 12 years old, whereas the females are the ones that tend to live a bit longer. So Seal Spotter can help, the public can help us with this, and we're about to launch a kind of marketing campaign because we just did our newest version and we're ready to make a big public announcement about it. So feel free to pass this information along. The more people that download this free app, the better, and that can engage. And it's on both Apple and Android. So one of the things people don't know about us is that we do a ton of education. I mean, just tons. We educate more than, not including our visitor yard, which greets about 50,000 people a year. Our education department engages an additional 20 to 30,000 a year. People and kids, or adults and kids. And so we do this through our visitor yard, which is free. It's open every day, 10 to 4. We have after school programs, camp programs, scout programs, field trip programs, distance learning, summer camp. And we also have a program for teens now. And we are also, we're collaborating with Orange Coast College, and we're offering a rescue and rehabilitation course for them as well. So we're really proud of all that we're reaching. We try very hard to impart the conservation information in every single presentation and program that we do, so people can learn what they can do to help. Because it's really, when it comes down to it, we are at a tipping point, and each of us needs to get involved, you know, whether it's just, you know, doing stuff at home, like turning lights off, to, you know, reduce carbon emissions, to help with climate change, or, you know, reducing your plastic intake. All those little bits add up. Oh, and I forgot about our, we also have our give back programs. These are our free programs for different special groups in the community. So Pinniped Pollution Project teaches kids from Title I schools about the watershed and all of the different human impacts on the watershed, and how we can reduce that by being more mindful and eco-friendly. And then we have Saving Seals, which is for at-risk youth, where we bring them to PMMC, and they do different programs, and it's really focused on helping them understand that school is important, and that staying in school is good for their future success and can lead to careers like what we do as well. And then Healing Seals is our program for children's hospitals. I looked around and said, wow, these animals are in a hospital experience and we've got children out there in hospitals. Why don't we try to bring them a little bit of the outside world with something they can identify with? And it's been a huge hit. We are in 13 hospitals right now. We will be in 16 hospitals by the end of the year. Most of the hospitals we are in have Ryan Seacrest studios, and that's how we kind of started this, was at Chalk, and then expanded out from there. And we also send the hospitals these little ocean discovery kits for the kids. And so they get to explore the ocean and how cool marine mammals are and ocean conservation. And it has a lot of cool little activities, as well as they get a sea lion plush, dolphin socks, and a dolphin puzzle that they get to put together, and a really cool activity booklet. So it's fun to give to them. And then finally, we have a program for service members. It's called Sea Lions for Service Members, where veterans can come to us. We either do an event-like program, or we have small groups of veterans come to us and participate in some of the things that we do in animal care. And so they can, basically they help us take care of the animals. So helping someone else always helps heal your own soul. And it also helps the veterans understand that even though you're out of the service, there are still purposes out there where you can serve. And that's a big thing with veterans reassimilating to civilian life, is really losing that purpose. And so we're trying to help them understand that when you come back, there is still purpose out there. You just need to find it. And ours is one of them, and you're welcome to join us, or we can help you find another. So it's a really gratifying program. So these are the things that we talk to people about, the simple things. If we're getting more in depth in a conservation topic, we will go beyond just this. But so the basics of what people can do in their own lives is, number one is just refuse. Refuse single-use plastic, refuse excessively packaged items like these bananas. Somebody was crazy when they did this. And so this is a good one with kids, where I will say, what's wrong with this picture? And the first answer I got the first time I used this picture, it was like, who buys one banana anyway? And I'm like, well, that is true, but not what I was hoping for. We finally got around to the fact of over packaging and what they could do about it by reducing and refusing. And then, of course, talking to people about reusing. We always talk about recycling being the last thing that we do, because there's a lot of problems with plastic recycling, obviously. And now that China is no longer buying our plastic, we have an even bigger problem. And so we are trying to really encourage people to think about what they're buying before they buy it, and reduce that, excessive packaging and single use. And then, finally, really talking to people about rethinking, whether it be by going organic, to support organic farmers and try to raise the amount of people that demand for it, so that way prices will come down, and it will be more of a thing that everybody can do, but then also, of course, all of the eco-friendly products out there, so that we're not using chemicals and damaging our environment further. So to date, we have rescued over 8,000 animals, and we always intend to rescue more. We're not going to slow down, but while we're doing it, we're going to keep expanding our education and outreach missions, and our research mission as well. So I really thank you for letting me talk today. I don't know how much time we have, because I know, Leanne, I talked to you that, I could share that other research project, but I have a feeling that I've probably talked more than my share, because I can't see a time.
Well, we'll just have to have you back. And
yeah, that's fine too, because
so,
we did a really neat enrichment project with the animals to as a way to enhance their rehabilitation. And it was a fantastically fun project because the animals had so much fun. And then we saw such wonderful rehabilitation applications for them. So it was.
We'll have to have you back in 2024. That's awesome.
Please do.
Yeah. I know we have quite a few, and I apologize. That if there are people that need to leave, I certainly understand. I'm open to.
But let me moderate
Okay.
the questions, and what I'll do is try to pick, instead of asking all the questions, I'll try to get a question from each of the people that ask. Many people ask.
I think one of mine was answered, so that works.
Many people ask different kinds of questions, and so and this is, no offense to anybody, that I'm just going to kind of randomly pick this. So Kim is asking whether you are checking the sea lions at La Jolla Cove. The two of us were having an interesting dialogue before everybody else got on. So comment a little about that, please.
Okay, so that is not our area. We are responsible, and I should have said this earlier, for the 52 miles of coastline of Orange County. And so there are people, like different organizations, both above and below us, north and south of us, that deal with those areas, and that's their territory. So SeaWorld, their rescue and rehabilitation offshoot actually is responsible for the San Diego County and that coastline. So we go from San Onofre to Seal Beach. And so they pick up below us, and then north of us is the Marine Mammal Care Center. And so yes, SeaWorld is responsible for La Jolla. There is a lot of challenge with La Jolla, and in particular, and one that people don't understand, and I will say, I've been in that scenario because I was down there over, I think it was in, December. And there was a tiny pup that had been abandoned, and it was just calling and moving around trying to find somebody to nurse from, being pecked on by seagulls, and it was just heartbreaking to watch. But the problem is that at that same time there's an abandoned pup, there's a lot of pups being nursed by moms there, and as soon as you go down to try to rescue that one pup, the moms all rush into the ocean and potentially abandon those other pups. And so unfortunately, they have to just let nature take its course. I mean, I know the feeling, because I was holding myself back from running down on that beach and just grabbing that pup, because I was just, it was so excruciating to watch. But that's what they're faced with. And a lot of people just don't understand that, we want to rescue it, but we would be endangering all of these other pups. So that's a problem. And then you've got the sea lions down there, and that's an emerging colony. And unfortunately, there have been issues with humans trying to interact with the pups and try to pet them and things like that. And so there's been, I think there was at least one fatality of a pup that ended up basically being chased into the water and drowned. And so I know that they are, they've been succeeding at getting some time frames where people are not allowed down on the beaches, like during the pupping season. And I know that applies to the seals. I don't know if that was pushed through from the sea lions, because I know that they were I think it was the Sierra Club that was trying to get that to happen. And they've reached out to us a couple of times, and we gave some information and things, but that's a real tough scenario down there.
Has your organization shared the Seal Spotter app with local whale watching operators or boat captains?
That is funny that you should say that. And by the way, I put my email address in the chat. So if anybody has questions that we didn't have time for, you can absolutely shoot me an email. We are planning on, now that the app is refurbished, finished, and ready to go, we have an event coming up. It's our May 20th capital campaign kickoff, and we're also installing a really cool art exhibit that is in dedication to our founder John Cunningham. After that, because that's taking up all of our development team's time, we plan on trying to put together and then launch a media campaign on Seal Spotter. And one of the things that we were going to do during that campaign is reach out to the different whale watching vessels in Orange County and beyond, to see if they would pass that information along, as well as we're going to have these little kind of signs made up that they can either adhere on boats, or that they could put in their shops, that, you know, advertise Seal Spotter as something to use when they're out on the whale watching vessel that can help. So yes, definitely. So that campaign will be hopefully launched in no later than July, is what we're hoping.
Let us know about that. If you think about it, get a hold of Leanne and give us the information, and we'll distribute that to our membership lists. So
Oh, that'd be
I think
amazing.
that would be, I think that's a very parallel activity for us. So in the interest of time, you've been wonderful, and it's been awesome, and we look forward to seeing you again. But I turn it back to Leanne to take us home.
Again, thank you so much. You know, it's just been very enlightening, and I especially love the use of tilapia skin to fix some of the animals. That's really interesting. So, but thank you again. I'll definitely be in touch to see about setting up something, because I would love to hear about the enrichment program and how it gets the animals excited.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. These are always so much fun for me to just talk to different people. And so I appreciate it. And anytime you need a speaker, I'm happy to jump on board.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And good night, everybody.
All right.
Thank you for staying. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.